Tonight's presentation is entitled The 11 Gentlemen from Charleston. For the last two meetings, we have been discussing the formal beginnings of this institution known as the Masonic family. In July, I outlined the transformation of how labor guild lodges changed into a diverse group of men seeking knowledge and higher moral character. We point to the year 1717 as the establishment of the Grand Lodge of England as the exact date that some of the lodges were joined together and the Masonic fraternity was launched. In August, the next month, we talked about the amazing interest in producing additional or higher degrees during the rest of the 1700s, primarily in France. And then the actual collection of some of those degrees into an add-on Masonic organization now known as the Scottish Rite in Charleston, South Carolina in 1801. This will be the last in the three-part historical sequence of the creation of basic Masonry and its stepchild, the higher degrees. Last month, I discussed how John Mitchell self-appointed himself as the Sovereign Grand Commander, and then after administering the 33rd degree to his friend, Dr. Frederick Dalco, then appointed him as Lieutenant Grand Commander of a new organization, which eventually was called the Ancient and Accepted Rite of Freemasonry. This took place on May the 31st, 1801. And at the close of the session last time, this was the state of affairs. We had two men who were on the Supreme Council, Dalco and Mitchell, and that's where we left them. So, following the format set up in the Grand Constitution of 1786 in Berlin, the first step was to create a 9-man Supreme Council. We already have 2, so we needed 7 more. The process took 15 months. The 8th and 9th members of the appointed to the Supreme Council were Frenchmen, de Grasse-Tilly and his father-in-law, De La Hogue, who had fled from San Domingo of the West Indies to Charleston in 1795. Their tenure on the council lasted for only a few months, as de Grasse-Tilly returned to Jamaica and actually at that time established a Supreme Council of the West Indies, and De La Hogue followed him and was his Lieutenant Grand Commander for less than a year. De La Hogue eventually returned to France after the French Revolution ended and was employed with the Ministry of War of the new regime. Now, this new Supreme Council of the West Indies was considered to be the second Supreme Council of the world after Charleston. It is no longer in existence. So that their departure required the appointment of 2 more to fill out the 9 required. These positions were filled with Moses Clava Levy and Dr. James Moultrie. The last appointment was made in August of 1802, so that's the 15-month period from May the 31st, 1801 to August of 1802 to actually fill out and have a full 9-man Supreme Council. The official date for the start of this new collection of higher degrees, which we now call the Scottish Rite, was May the 31st, 1801, when John Mitchell and Frederick Dalco convened the first meeting. However, the first Supreme Council was not complete until August of 1802, as mentioned. These first Supreme Council appointees have been referred to by the Scottish Rite historians as the 11 Gentlemen of Charleston. I passed out a deal that shows the listing of these 11 men and a little bit about them, and so you can follow on with those sheets as we take a look at these founding fathers. And what actually caught my attention was the vast differences in these men, the diversity of ethnic backgrounds, religion, professions. The old adage of birds of a feather flock together was not being used when this group was assembled. It appears to me that John Mitchell envisions Scottish Rite Masonry as an organization which wraps its arms around all kinds of people. I will give you a quick thumbnail sketch now of the Leben gentlemen of Charleston. John Mitchell, born in Antrim, County, Ireland in 1741, came to America at the age of 28 to join his older brother, who was in the mercantile business in Philadelphia. During the Revolutionary War, he was appointed Deputy Quartermaster General for the whole Continental Army and attained the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. He went by Colonel Mitchell in his later years. In 1801, he was the SGIG of South Carolina of the Lodge of Perfection when he started the Scottish Rite. He served as the Grand Commander until his death in 1816. So from 1801 to 1816, John Mitchell was the Sovereign Grand Commander. Number 2, as mentioned already, Dr. Frederick Dalcoe came to America from England. However, he was the son of a military officer who served Frederick the Great in the Prussian army. So really, Dalcoe nationality would have been considered Prussian or German by birth. After arriving in America at age 17, he studied medicine and became a surgeon during the Revolutionary War. Later settled in Charleston and practiced medicine. He succeeded Mitchell as Grand Commander and served in the top spot for the 6 years after Mitchell died. Number 3, Abraham Alexander, an English Jew, trained as a rabbi, came to America at age 21 and served in Charleston as rabbi of the congregation Beth Elohim for the rest of his life. Was also described as a calligraphist, which may account for his election as the first Secretary General. Number 4, Emanuel De La Mota, born at St. Croix in the West Indies. He was of Danish Jewish parents. He was a commissioned merchant and auctioneer, served as Grand Treasurer General for the first 10 years, an active member of Beth Elohim congregation. You'll hear that again. Thomas Bartholomew Bowen arrived in America before the revolution started and served as a major during the hostilities. He was Irish and a printer by trade. Was the first original founder to die in 1805. Coming from Ireland, we don't know for sure what his religious preference was, but coming from Ireland, we have to assume he was Catholic. Number 6, Israel de Leben. That's L-I-E-B-E-N. Jody couldn't read my writing there on that one. She did a great job otherwise, though. De Leben, born in Prague, Bohemia, now the Czech Republic. The name Israel is an easy identifier as a member of the Jewish faith. I have read some things that said he was a very outgoing and friendly person, and the third member to be listed as belonging to Beth Elohim congregation or synagogue. Number 7 was Dr. Isaac Auld, born of Scottish parents in Pennsylvania. A medical doctor by profession, his father was a successful businessman and a Mason. So becoming a Mason was an easy decision for Dr. Auld. He and Dr. Dalco were the youngest members of the original 11 on the Supreme Council. He was listed as both a Congregationalist and as a Presbyterian. He succeeded Dalco as the third Sovereign Grand Commander in 1822 and was the last of the original 11 to serve as Grand Commander. Alexander Francois Augusta Tilley. He was the son, we've already mentioned him, he and De La Mota, but let me give you a little bit more information on each one of them. He was, Augusta Tilley was the son of a famous French admiral. He had a short tenure on the Charleston Supreme Council. After spending some time in the West Indies, he eventually moved back to France. And in 1804, listen to this. This is really kind of an amazing statistic. In 1804, he established the Supreme Council of France in Bordeaux, France. He also, that same year, was credited with starting the Supreme Council of Italy, the Supreme Council of Spain in 1809, and the Supreme Council of Belgium in 1817. All, of course, were patterned after the Charleston model. So you would have to say that he was really a person who brought this new higher degree form of Masonry to a lot of people. His father-in-law, Jean-Baptiste Marie de la Mota, he and his son-in-law, Augusta Tilley, were displaced French Catholics who no doubt left their mark in the period of Charleston prior to 1801, but for only a short time thereafter. Both eventually returned to France. Then the two that took their place, Moses Clava Levy, a Polish Jew who came to America via England. He later listed among his honors was being president of Beth Elohim congregation. So 4 of the original 11 were all Jewish, and they all belonged to the same congregation there in Charleston. And what's unusual about that is that all of these Jews came from completely different locations in the world. They were not from concentrated places like all from England or whatever. So they all came kind of unique. The last one was Dr. James Moultrie, born in South Carolina of Scottish parents. He returned to Edinburgh to study medicine in Scotland. His father and grandfather were doctors who had also studied in Edinburgh, so we were just following in the family line. Upon return to the States as a medical doctor, he was active in things Masonic. Now that we have listed the 11 original members of the original Supreme Council, let's analyze this group. Last month, I mentioned that Charleston was a unique city because of the diversity of its population in 1801. Out of that diverse population group in Charleston came an even more diverse group brought together primarily by John Mitchell and called the Supreme Council of a new experiment, an additional group of the fraternity called Masonry. Only 2 of this group of 11 were native-born Americans. One was born in Pennsylvania and one in South Carolina. The rest of them were all not native-born Americans. And two of them were Frenchmen, 2 from Scotland, 2 from Ireland, 1 was a German, and 1 a Polish person, Poland. So, quite a diversity there. Take a look at the religion. By religion, 4 were Jewish, at least 3 were Protestants. Assuming the Irish members were Catholic, this would make a total of 4 Catholics. Quite a diversity there. By profession, we had soldiers, physicians, merchants, and clergymen. To me, the most surprising fact was that of the 11, 4 were Jews and probably 4 were Catholic, and because after 100 years of operation of the Scottish Rite, from 1801 to 1901, the year McAllister received its first Lodge of Perfection. The fraternity had changed primarily to a Protestant membership. William Fox, the author of the book The Lodge of the Double-Headed Eagle, made this statement: "It is hard to imagine a more stunning example of American assimilation in the early national period of our nation." And Albert Pike said this about the original 11. "We have no reason to be ashamed of our parentage of the original Supreme Council." He further stated, "They were a remarkable group of men. One thing especially impressed me. Between the 11 founders, not a single piece of evidence indicates the slightest dissension between them, and a close friendship existed among the group. In the business of the rite, they all had a single-minded devotion." This was Albert Pike's perspective. And of course, that's really amazing, that because they were so diverse, so they came from such different backgrounds. By August of 1802, the two Frenchmen had left, and their replacements, Levy and Moultrie, had been appointed, and the Supreme Council then set about its business of being recognized by the rest of the Masonic world. On December the 4th, 1802, the Supreme Council adopted a 7-page report prepared by Dr. Dalco, Dr. Auld, and Emanuel De La Mota, 3 of the younger members, and this report was called originally the Circular Throughout the Two Hemispheres. The report, later referred to as the Manifesto of 1802, this is how it's most people refer to it now, the Manifesto of 1802, was sent to different symbolic lodges and the other sublime grand lodges and councils throughout the two hemispheres. The manuscript set out what this new Supreme Council had accomplished in the last 18 months. It included its list of 33 degrees, which are substantially the same as what we have today, and they cited as its authority stemming from the Grand Constitution of 1786. Considering the amazing quilt work of higher degrees of the Masonic world at this time in 1801, it is surprising that the Manifesto received a tremendous vote of confidence. Sweden was the first to recognize the Charleston group, and thereafter they were accepted and recognized around the Masonic world. This diverse group of men evidently pushed the right buttons as they launched a new segment of Masonry, which has spun off at least 40 other Supreme Councils through the years. Today we recognize Scottish Rite Masonry as a very important part of the Masonic family. Notwithstanding the fact that it was given recognition, it remained in a very minor role for the first 60 years. Now here we have an organization that first started, and they're recognized by the rest of the Masonic world. You think that they might explode. Not the case. Quoting William Fox, he said, listen to this, he said, "For the next half century, Scottish Rite was a superfluous part of American Freemasonry." Superfluous. I thought, does superfluous mean what I think it means? So I looked it up in the dictionary. The definition was being more than is wanted, redundant, unnecessary. Wow, this was a harsh description, but evidently it was true for those first years. John Mitchell served as the Sovereign Grand Commander until his death in 1816. He was followed by the Lieutenant Grand Commander Frederick Dalco. During Dalco's tenure, he was in the process of changing from being a physician to training to become an Episcopal minister. After his resignation, his friend and fellow physician, Dr. Isaac Auld, succeeded him in 1822 for the next 4 years and served in the top spot. Dr. Auld died in 1826, and he was the last of the original 11 to serve as Grand Commander. During the administrations of Dalco and Auld, the total number of members of this worldwide organization, recognized worldwide at least, was 70. 70 total members. And almost all of whom were citizens of Charleston. So basically, it was really just a local organization. Following Dr. Auld as Grand Commander was another physician, Dr. Moses Holbrook, who, of course, he was not a member of the original 11, but he was the third doctor in a row to serve as Grand Commander. He took over in 1826. Another Masonic occurrence took place in 1826. Can anyone remember what it was? We've talked about it. The William Morgan affair took place. The apparent murder of William Morgan by a group of Masons created a nationwide anti-Masonic campaign, and the anti-Masonic political party was formed. We've talked about that in here, had a program on it. Because of this anti-Masonic feeling, this new Scottish Rite organization actually became inactive from 1832 to 1842. In the early 1840s, the anti-Masonic fever died down, and in 1844, after the death of Dr. Holbrook, Alexander Macdonald was elected Grand Commander for 2 years. But let me tell you what happened. In 1846, 2 years after he took over, Macdonald left Charleston and was never heard from again. The suddenness of his departure has never been explained, and the date and place of his death to this day remain unknown. They don't know what happened to him. Following Macdonald's exodus, the Reverend John Henry Honor became the new Grand Commander, and in 1846 served until 1849, when the new era of Scottish Rite took over with the elevation of Albert Pike as the Sovereign Grand Commander. During these first 58 years of this new collection of the higher degrees, the main accomplishment were the solid beginning, and then, as Fox described it, keeping the flame alive. Keeping the flame alive until the arrival of Albert Pike. Fires in 1819 and in 1838 burned almost all of the original records, meeting minutes and so forth. This has been the story of the inauspicious beginning of the ancient and accepted rite of Masonry, Southern jurisdiction, which later adds the word Scottish to its title, and the organization that we are all currently belong to and very proud of. Thank you.